Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, One Piece chapter 960 is out. So if you haven't checked out that chapter yet, I suggest that you do so because I will be spoiling you. But now that you have, let's begin. Odin Kozuki is legendary. This chapter was just pure entertainment. But a part of me kind of wonders whether or not it's going to be divisive or trigger some people just because of the content of it. I mean, Odin Kazuki was pretty much abusive coming out of the womb. At the age of 6 or 7, whatever it is, it said, I mean, he was hooking up with prostitutes. The man stole men's wives and formed a harem. But because of his manliness, the women that he abducted ended up choosing him over their husbands. For God's sake, he cooked Odin on the bones and ashes of a deceased friend. What the heck, dude? Who does that? Odin Kazuki is pretty much the anti-politically correct, and I kind of like that. But at the same time, I can kind of figure that Odin might be, to some people, the character that they hate most, at least based on this, how he is at this time in his life, the wild child that he is. But I guess the thing that I find most interesting about this, just philosophically, right, just in terms of discussion about characters, people, natures, in general is, the gut reaction, right, to a character such as Odin and what he was doing is, he's a douche. Or as people have been calling him, the ultimate Chad. Childish, inconsiderate, self-centered, self-serving, egotistical. I think all that's pretty fair. But at the very same time, I'm going to tell you that the majority of people out there, men specifically, probably would like to be like him. This sort of dichotomy is fascinating to me, because this is what I believe to be the truth. This is a horrendous person that, I kind of wish I could do that. At least have the power to, right? But of course, with great power comes with great responsibility. For a lot of dudes, I'd say the majority of dudes out there, we tend to be highly competitive, and Odin is outcompeted everybody. He is the alpha dog. I feel like a lot of people put up a front and they say things like, I don't care what people think, I do what I want, YOLO. But it's not really true because people do care what other people think, and rightfully so. Odin does not. Clearly. Really, Odin's like bordering this line between I am the worst scum that human nature is capable of producing and hero. But I got a real feeling of the genius of Oda from this chapter as well because of the subtlety in which he's able to sort of depict a character like this and have it give us sort of levels of characterization and a kind of deepness, right? So as Odin is cooking his Odin on the bones of what I presume to be his friend, there's a sense of emotion there, right? Like, this is his way of grieving, of paying tribute to the dead. He wanted to share one more meal and one more drink with his friend in a very intimate way, not just a feast after the occasion, not just a wake. No, he wanted to do it with him. This scene alone makes me think that, yeah, there's all these legends and he gets into all these trouble. And we, of course, see where his story goes. He's probably not a bad person, but he is certainly different. Odin is Odin. The only rules that he follows are his own. And this is precisely the kind of person that could lead the life that he ultimately led, I think. You want to talk about freedom and living free? Well, Odin walked the walk. And this is something that I can respect and something that I've grown to love about many One Piece characters. But make no mistake about it, the Odin that we see here is not the final version. This is the immature, the one that still needs to grow and learn when it is that you should join the herd and when it is that you should stand up for what it is that you believe. But yeah, it's really interesting to try and get inside Odin Kozuki's head at this time, right? We don't have a whole lot, but we can speculate about how it is his thought process works. For instance, stealing other men's wives is a bastard thing to do, but perhaps in Odin Kozuki's mind, living his own way, doing what he wants to do, what he thinks is right. I don't think that he views himself as a bad guy. Most bad guys don't. So perhaps it's something like he believes that he's making other men better by forcing them to have to defend and take back what it is that they love. A sort of, if you want it so badly, take it back deal. Force them to become better, stronger, insert adjective men. But yeah, just to reach some kind of conclusion, Oda did a fantastic job with Odin. I think that he is really, really interesting. I'm so hyped for more of this backstory. But yeah, in terms of speculation, in terms of theory crafting from this chapter, there's not a whole lot, I think, to be gained here. This was another one of those chapters where you just sit back, you read it, you enjoy, you laugh, that sort of deal. But there are a couple discussion points that I do want to hit on. And so I think the biggest of all of these relates to Denjiro. And so if you guys, you know, part of the community, right, the biggest speculation, I think that the vast majority of people believed, was that Kyoshiro from present day is Denjiro. This is mainly for three reasons, possibly four. The first of which is that we got to see a preliminary design for Denjiro, who looks a hell of a lot like Kyoshiro today. The second reason is that the anime might have hinted at this as well. During the theme song for Wano Kuni, the 9 red scabbards are sort of introduced all at one time, and Kyoshiro is among this group. And third, we're just running out of characters who could possibly be Denjiro. I mean, we're in Act 3 in Wano. We assume that if Denjiro is here somewhere, we would have met him or learned of him, or, you know, he's somewhere secretly, we've heard of him. And so the only real two characters that it seems like he could be is Kyoshiro or the Witching Hour boy, if he is alive, which is no guarantee, by the way. And so the fourth reason, which is mainly conjecture, speculative, is Kyoshiro sees the card that Komurasaki is holding and appears to have been able to gather some kind of information from it. It seems like he understood its importance, which could hint at his ability to understand the symbolism in the card, which could mean that he was a former vassal or retainer of the Kozuki. But this chapter drops a huge dump all over that idea because we get to see Denjiro, and just straight up, guys, he looks nothing like Kyoshiro. But at the same time, this is one of the hardest things to unpack from this chapter because just because Kyoshiro doesn't look like Denjiro does not mean that he is not him, because we also get to see Tsuru and Kinemon in this chapter when they were younger, and they look nothing like, or very little like they do now, especially Tsuru. Tsuru and present-day Tsuru are unrecognizable in my opinion. Tsuru might in fact be the only thing that is keeping this Denjiro is Kyoshiro theory alive, because I would say that Kyoshiro and Tsuru, their features are pretty common in the way that they are drawn, seemingly based on ukiyo-e art. So if Tsuru can change this much, then Kyoshiro could as well. And then we'll see later that this same sort of argument is used to justify another theory, so people aren't really being consistent about it. But my opinion is that this is something that I believed beforehand. Kyoshiro was Denjiro. I do not believe that any longer. I don't think that it is impossible for it to be true, but it is not something that I feel the need or want to argue. The only thing that this chapter really gives us that could be constituted as any kind of hint at similarity between Kyoshiro and Denjiro is their interest in money, right? We don't see a lot of Denjiro in this chapter, but he seems to be very money savvy. And I think that we get the very same impression of Kyoshiro. Denjiro is also revealed to be a orphan, which is the kind of person, and friends with Kinemon, who was a member of the Yakuza. So we sort of have a way in which Denjiro could have become a Yakuza, which Kyoshiro is the leader of in present times. So I just want to make this clear, the Kyoshiro theory is not dead. People are saying that it's dead. It's not dead. It's just not as believable as it was before. That's pretty much where I stand on this one. In a vacuum, all of these facts can align to make you want to argue that Denjiro is Kyoshiro, but at the end of the day, you look at their actual pictures when Denjiro is 14, 15, Kyoshiro today, it's like, well, it's hard to argue that they're the same person. So this leads us into the main big theory that I see the community talking about. Whereas people are saying the Kyoshiro theory is dead, everyone is saying that Denjiro is Koshiro, Zoro's sensei, Zoro's master, from his childhood. Just to cut to the chase here, I don't believe in this theory either, but for certain, Koshiro looks a lot more like Denjiro than Kyoshiro does. But it's everything else that surrounds this which makes this a hard theory to argue, in my opinion. So first, the evidences. We've talked about this a lot over the last several months, but Koshiro is very likely of Wano descent. He may not have been raised in Wano, that is debatable, but for certain, it seems as though that his father came from Wano. Secondly, this person, Denjiro, looks a lot like Koshiro. Third, Koshiro is about the right age, is very close. Koshiro is 51 years old, which is close enough to where Denjiro should be, how old he should be in this scene for it to make some sense. And last, we can see Denjiro's sword, and we don't get to see all of it, and it's not in high res, we can't be definitive about this, but there are certainly similarities between this sword and the Wado Ichimonji, the sword that Koshiro gave to Zoro, the family blade. This has the makings of a very strong theory, but there are some problems. Or at least some things which definitely need to be in some way rationalized or justified. I want to go back to Koshiro being 51 years old. Denjiro here, to me, appears to be older than 10 years old. Keep in mind that this flashback is taking place 41 years before the current story. If it said 39 in the last chapter, that was a typo confirmed by Oda's staff on Twitter. It's 41 years ago. He looks 14, 15, he looks adolescent at the very least, which would mean that Denjiro in this scene is too old, even if it's close. Secondly, this is not yet 100% confirmed, but the community has already come to the conclusion, I believe this to be factual, that Koshiro is the son of the swordsman who made the Wado Ichimonji and Enma. So this name is kind of difficult for me to pronounce, so I call him Shimotsuke Zabu, but his full name is Kozaburo. Koshiro has the symbol of the Shimotsuke clan on his clothing on multiple occasions, and the village in which he lives and the village in which he trained Zoro in is Shimotsuke Village in the East Blue. And so let's focus in on their actual naming patterns. We have Koshiro, Koshiro. So you have Ko-shi, which means 4, and Ro, and then you have Ko-zabu, which means 3, and Ro. Both of which have ties to the Shimotsuke family, and Koshiro is carrying the Wado Ichimonji as a family blade, the blade created by Zabu. So yeah, to me it seems fairly apparent that Koshiro is the son of Zabu. What we know about Zabu is he was a swordsmith who illegally left Wano 50 years before the beginning of the story. Keeping in mind, Koshiro is 51 years old, so would have been 1 year old when Zabu left the country. Koshiro likely wasn't raised in Wano. He is of Wano descent, his father is from Wano, but with him currently living outside of Wano, Shimotsuke Village in the East Blue, it seems likely that he, Koshiro, was not raised in Wano. The only way that this really works is if you have some weird situation in which Koshiro left Wano when he was 1 year old with his father and then came back before he was 10 years old. That's weird. It's not impossible. It's just weird to explain. And or the father left his son at 1 year old in Wano, left by himself to form Shimotsuke Village in the East Blue for whatever reason he would do that. And then that is why Koshiro is, in this flashback, Denjiro is an orphan. So yeah, for me personally, this is quite a lot to unpack, and you would have to speculate something along the lines of Denjiro or Koshiro leaving Wano again after this at some point in time, maybe to find his father, or something along those lines. But it gets a little bit more complicated than this, which is already really complicated. Kuena was born 24 years before the beginning of the story in the East Blue. Keep in mind that Koshiro or Denjiro should have been a vassal of Kozuki Odin. Odin, who became a pirate, joined Goldie Roger, and then later returned to Wano to open the borders. So if we accept it as fact that Kuena was born 24 years before the beginning of the story in the East Blue, then Koshiro Denjiro would have had to have left Wano in order to create Kuena, and then come back to Wano to be able to fight with Kozuki Odin against the Shogun and against Kaido, and fight with Ashura Doji against Kaido, and then would have had to leave Wano again to go back to the East Blue. Again, guys, it is not impossible for this to have happened, it's just very, very specific. But I would say that most of this is conjecture, speculation, we're not entirely sure. I think the biggest evidence against Koshiro being Denjiro at this point in time is people are saying as a big evidence why Denjiro is Koshiro is that he is carrying the Wado Ichimonji. Guys, if Denjiro was famous and Kinemon knew him well with that sword, that at some point in time would have been made apparent in the story. Kinemon and Momonosuke have been traveling with the Strath for 300 chapters, and not once have they drawn attention to the Wado Ichimonji that Zoro now carries. If that was Denjiro's sword, we would already know it. There would at least be some kind of clue, some kind of hint, like wow, the Wado Ichimonji ... something. But we've got nothing. So for me personally, this is something that Oda would have been forced to foreshadow, because otherwise it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You don't carry around this sword without it reminding you of your compatriot. So then, taking away this evidence, Denjiro is not carrying the Wado Ichimonji. What are we left with? Well, we're left with a little boy that looks somewhat similar to Koshiro, but is also very different, similar to the differences between Kiyoshiro, honestly. Koshiro has slanted eyes. Denjiro's eyes are wide open. They have different eyebrows and face shapes, and they act differently. I mean, seriously, taking away the evidence that Denjiro is carrying around the Wado Ichimonji, if you rule that out, this theory is just as strong or weak, however you want to look at it, as the Kiyoshiro is Denjiro theory, pretty much. They may look slightly more alike, but there's still enough differences to say no. And then you're forced to go back to the Suru looks completely different argument in order to be like, oh, they look different, but that doesn't matter. And I would say that unlike Kiyoshiro, another problem that we have with Koshiro being Denjiro is, what has he been doing for Wano? He left Wano to go to the East Blue and is now, what happened to your country, man? What happened to your people? What happened to your dream of getting vengeance on and fulfilling the dreams of Odin Kozuki? It doesn't appear as though the story is going in that direction at all. And it kind of makes you think less of Denjiro Koshiro. But I don't want to make this thought the end-all, be-all, because there's always potential for something greater. I love to theory craft, and so Koshiro doesn't have a connection to many things in the One Piece universe aside from Zoro, but he does have a connection with the Revolutionary Army, right? The Revolutionary Army appears on Zoro's island, and the only people there seems to be Koshiro, so the big theory is that he's a member of the Revolutionary Army. Maybe what he's trying to do in order to help Wano is to get the revolutionary armies to contribute to the fight against the Shogun and Kaido. Maybe that is what he has been working towards, and that thought, I think, is pretty hype, if true. But there's some interesting things that the Koshiro theory explains better than any other theory. For instance, you would have to explain, if you believe Koshiro to be Denjiro, why his name would be changed, why he would call himself Denjiro in the past and Koshiro today. So let's assume, right, for the sake of the speculation, that Zabu abandoned his son at 1 year old in Wano and left the country illegally. So then we would be able to presume that it would just be Koshiro and his mother. If his mother died, then what would he be? He would be an orphan. Potentially, if his mother died young enough, he wouldn't know his actual name. He would have had to give himself a new name. And if he sought out his father later, how he would have done so, I'm not entirely sure, but let's just assume for the sake, then he could have learned his real name, Koshiro, and then call himself that from then on. But anyway, guys, this Koshiro's Denjiro theory is really interesting. I do like it more than Kiyoshiro is Denjiro, but I don't like either of them, personally. And my personal belief is that Denjiro is somebody else. That's just my gut feeling from this chapter. I don't really like either of them, but it could be either one as well. I wouldn't be opposed to Denjiro being dead. The only other person that we can speculate to be Denjiro, other than Kiyoshiro in the present story or Koshiro, would be the Witching Hour Boy, and I think the Witching Hour Boy is Komurasaki, so I don't believe that. Another idea that I've heard is that Denjiro seems to look a lot like Scopper Kaban. I really don't like this idea. I like it less than Kiyoshiro and Koshiro for sure. I think that, again, there's differences that you have to sort of overlook. And second off, how does a vassal of Odin Kazuki become the number 3 of the Roger Pirates ahead of him? That would just be very, very strange. I would say, guys, that of all the things that I've heard recently, the one that is most interesting, the one that is most likable for me at this time is the idea that Denjiro is dead, but his son lives on. Kiyoshiro is the son of Denjiro. There is absolutely no evidence to back this theory up, but just in a vacuum, it's a really cool idea. I just want to point out, though, for a moment how divided the community is on Kiyoshiro. I mean, Kiyoshiro could realistically be 51 years old to some people, and as young as 30 or 20. Nobody is exactly sure. I don't think that there is any kind of consensus. But yeah, who is Denjiro, guys? I feel like that this question, after this chapter, just got really tired. For me personally, it's it became something that I wanted to speculate a lot to. After this chapter, I want to wait and see what the answer actually is. Because of everything that's going on, unless we get some sort of major clue, I'm tapped out, honestly, on Ninjiro speculations. But yeah, there is one other thing that I want to talk about from this chapter, and this is what they call the Mountain God. Guys, if you remember a lot of speculations surrounding Momonosuke, his unique powers of being able to control Zunisha. The idea is that Momonosuke might be the ancient weapon Uranus, or might have some power, some ability similar to Poseidon, where he has command over creatures, can essentially order them about, and they are forced to follow his commands. He is like the king of the land beasts. But for this to make sense, I believe that there has to be creatures other than Zunisha that Momonosuke is able to control. Other, what we dubbed at the time Land Kings. And here we're introduced to a mountain god, a very large boar. And it just makes me wonder whether or not we might get something along those lines to help us substantiate this kind of idea. Would this mountain god be a kind of creature that Momonosuke could order about? If you guys recall back to Zou, it was stated that Odin Kozuki and Roger said the same thing about Zunisha, that they could hear Zunisha, but they just couldn't control it. They couldn't communicate back to it or tell it what to do. Right now, we have Odin going to face this mountain god. I'm just curious as to how this plays out, and if it's going to play out in a similar way of how we would imagine an interaction between Odin and Zou. I also found it really interesting how the boar sort of disguised itself as a mountain. These people were looking at it, thought it was a mountain that moved. It makes me think about Wano now, and I assume that these mountain gods still exist somewhere. Are they just blending in with the environment? Is this just another important creature that Tama is going to be able to tame using her devil fruit abilities? Gotta be honest, guys, I really love the introduction of these mountain gods, and can't help but to think that they might play an important role in the Wano Kuni arc at some point in time. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much what I had to say about this chapter. Really enjoyed it. Curious what you guys think about it, whether you noticed something that I might have missed. Just share your thoughts. Like the video if you liked the video, dislike the video if you disliked the video. Make sure to subscribe if you want to be notified for my future content, and as always, guys, have a wonderful day.